Hello everybody and welcome to Parksbros. It's Drew here, and today we're heading back to Branson, Missouri for our full in-depth review of Time Traveler. Time Traveler was the first of its kind mock extreme spinning coaster. It opened on March 14th, 2018 at Silver Dollar City in Branson, Missouri. Now there's a lot of special tricks with this type of ride, and the main factor is it is a spinning coaster, but it also has launches, which was a first of its kind thing. But as we walk into the stats of this ride, it has a top height of 100 feet with a drop of 90 feet and 90 degrees straight down right out of the station. That brings it to a top speed of 50 miles an hour as it traverses all 3,020 feet of its track. Throughout that track length, you'll encounter 3 inversions, including a dive loop, a 95-foot tall loop, and a zero-G roll. Those aren't the only special moments on the ride, as there's 2 different LSM launches, one from 0 to 47 miles an hour in 3 seconds, and the second 30 miles an hour to 45 miles an hour in 3.5. So with that all said, let's figure out how to get there. Time Traveler finds itself in the Valley Road section of the park, and to get there, once you head through security and of course the park's entry gift shop, you'll make a right onto that main pathway, and it's actually one of the easier rides to find, as you'll end up running into the exit gift shop and just make a right just past it, and you'll see Thunderation on the right hand side and Time Traveler's entrance on the left. Once you enter Time Traveler's queue, you will go down a couple sets of stairs, which are all themed pretty interestingly and kind of loosely to this time traveling theme, but that's until you get into the main switchbacks. As the station building, being as tall as it is, there are 3 separate levels of queuing right underneath, and every single one has progressively more and more theming. You'll get some amazing views out the windows of the first drop on the coaster, which is such a star moment. But on the opposite side, you'll get a look into the blueprints of this time machine and a lot of the backstory of the ride. As an inventor from the 1880s slowly and surely figured out how to officially time travel, and you're going to be a test subject. There's plenty of clocks hanging about, pictures of the inventor, and to top it all off, there's some bluegrass versions of time-themed songs, such as Clocks by Coldplay and Time After Time. I gotta say, in terms of the entire park, this is probably one of my favorite queues to sit in. Maybe that's just because I love listening to that bluegrass version of Freebird, but the theming definitely really helps, and how spacious it feels. Although there are plenty of switchback queues throughout this entire station area, none of it feels too unbelievably cramped, as there's especially a lot of headroom. Before you know it, you'll head up that final stairway up and find yourself in the station, where you'll see some really big set pieces, whether it's giant cogs or lighting effects, just over and to the side of the train. As you take a seat in one of the 8 rows throughout the 4 cars of this ride, you'll either be seated forwards or backwards, as this is a spinning coaster. And if you're curious, you're going to be sitting back to back with the row directly next to you on the car. So there's no awkward staring at people in the same car. I mean, you'll interact with people in different cars, but at least you're a little farther away. This, of course, is a mock coaster. So if you've experienced rides like Manta at SeaWorld San Diego or Copperhead Strike at Carowinds, this restraint system is going to be very familiar to you, as it is an over-the-shoulder lap bar that should rest just about on your hips. This part of the restraint is a little bit more bulky, but there's a lot of padding in there. And of course, there are some handles to hold on to if you're a little nervous. These seats, though, are, in my opinion, some of the best in the industry, as they're really form-fitting and ergonomic, as well as being very free-feeling with just that lap bar that ends up encompassing your whole body. With that said, though, it's time to ring that bell and head out the station. The moment you start moving in the station, you'll also begin your spinning experience. So even though you're facing forward or backward as you start to sit down, by the time you head out, you're not going to be facing the same way at all. And unlike most coasters, this starts in a very exciting way. There's no launch at the beginning, there's no lift hill, you just drop all the way down 90 feet, 90 degrees straight down, and you're spinning at the exact same time. To be honest, this is one of the star moments of the ride if you're in the back car. You'll get some amazing airtime as you're spinning and feeling completely out of control, but I will say towards the front, maybe even the second car, it's not nearly of an exhilarating experience. And while I do mention the spinning, I do want you to know it is more of a controlled spin, so it's not completely out of control. So don't expect to spin 45 times on this ride, but do expect to not be facing forward or backward for most of the ride. From that point on, you'll hit some nice positive G-forces, kind of pressing you down into your seat as you enter into the first inversion on the ride, a dive loop. This is such a fantastic visual moment on this coaster as you're kind of dodging in between pieces of track, between the loop and the launch. And especially if you're moving on the sideways plane, it is just crazy to look at. And if you're towards the front of the car, you'll get a little bit of hang time before you get brought down to the ground again, as you head into a quick left bank turn and then a right one right after, kind of creating this S-bend type of effect. And if you're spinning, this moment is absolutely cool. This is where, for me, the ride will die off quite a bit as you enter into realistically what the ride's mid-course brake run is. It's a moment where it'll slow you down all the way to a stop for a good 5, almost 10 seconds before you experience the first launch on the ride. Don't get me wrong, I think the first two elements on this coaster are absolutely fantastic, but then the momentum just stops. You'll get a great view of the station or the rest of the layout depending on which side you're facing, and before you know it, you'll be launched back to 45 miles an hour as you start to spin at the same time. This will lead you into a left overbank turn, which will get you a little bit of a positive G-force in there, as it really kind of tries to spin you a little bit, before that perfectly transitions into a sweeping left turn up into the 95-foot tall vertical loop. A lot of people like to meme this moment as it was quite a star in the advertising campaign for the ride. But I will say this moment is really, really cool, especially if you're sideways or backwards, as you wrap around the launch section of track you just went through. And you'll even get some nice positive Gs on the bottom of the loop and a little bit of hang time up top. This leads into probably my favorite element on this coaster. This is an off-axis airtime hill. As you enter the element turning to the left, but at the very top of the hill, you flip to the right, creating an even more forceful negative G experience. This is truly an exceptional element if you're facing in one of those weird, wacky directions, which most likely you will be. And this will lead directly into a right-handed turn that transitions again perfectly into the third and final inversion on the ride, the 0G roll, which outside of that off-axis airtime hill is another favorite of mine on this coaster, as it is incredibly disorienting, especially if you're facing sideways. You get some perfect 0Gs in there, but also the way it pulls you through the element in certain spots on the ride creates one of the most disorienting moments on any coaster I can think of. This again turns to the left and up into the second launch of the ride, but right before you enter the second launch, you'll get a nice little pop of airtime entering it kind of abruptly before getting pushed along during the second launch of the coaster into another overbank turn, but I will say this one feels a little bit better as it's got more of a banked curve to it, and it almost feels like an inversion on some rides before you plummet back towards the ground, twist to the left and hit the brake run, slow down to a near stop, and take a 180-degree right turn into the station. From this point, you'll get up, dodge some giant cog wheels that make the time machine work, and walk out on an exit bridge through the gift shop. Now that our experience on Time Traveler is all over, let's go over my thoughts. Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City. What can I say? It is really a fun ride. And I would say it is probably one of those coasters out there that I have to ride more and more. Don't get me wrong, I rode it probably upwards of 10 or 11 times on my entire trip to Silver Dollar City back in 2021. But because of that spinning nature and how different it was from car to car, as well as being just completely different with every spin or rotation we got, I could not be able to get a handle down on exactly what I think on a lot of the ride's moments. The spinning, honestly, I feel makes this ride a lot more accessible to a lot more people, as it is a more controlled spinning experience. It's nothing like a Sierra Sidewinder at Knott's Berry Farm, where you're just going to spin 16 times throughout the layout. That's just not really going to happen on Time Traveler. But I do think it makes it variable enough to make it more interesting than just your traditional steel or launch coaster. Dropping directly out of the station is absolutely superb if you're in the back car. Don't get me wrong, I think towards the front it's still really fun, just not nearly as intense. And I can't lie, my expectations were a little skewed, as everyone kept saying that first drop was the best moment at the entirety of the park, at least from what I was hearing. Now towards the back of the train, that might be true, but again, it's only towards the back that I really got that experience. From there, the first half definitely seems very short before you end up completely stopping, which is a real bummer to me. I kind of wish that moment was just a booster section, but at the same time, I get it. They are typically running 2, potentially 3 trains on this coaster, but I can't help but feel that first half is just a little bit too short with that stoppage. From there, the ride just gets fantastic. Every moment after that first launch is just super fun, especially some of those airtime pops, and that 0G roll is just unbelievable. I kind of wish every spinning coaster had a 0G roll at one point. But once you get to that second launch, it really is just a launch to get you back up to the height of the station, which I don't really have any problem with. It's a great little bit of finale, if you will, and maybe a touch of showmanship before they let you off. This ride has a really beautiful setting all around it. I know I should have mentioned that earlier, but when you're on ride, it's really hard to focus on that just because of the spinning aspect of this coaster. All the trees end up becoming blurs in your vision unless you're sitting on that first launch. I think this ride is a fantastic fit for Silver Dollar City. It kind of bridges the gap between family thrill and complete balls to the walls thrill, like something comparable to Outlaw Run. And I know a lot of people are probably thinking, oh man, Time Traveler has to be the most intense coaster at the park. Well, for me, I don't think so. Don't get me wrong, it is incredibly intense, especially compared to a family coaster or a kiddie coaster like the Grand Exposition. But it's not so insane that I wouldn't take my parents on it. I'd actually love to take them on it one day if they ever get out there. Overall, the theming for this ride is really cool, makes the ride a bit more enjoyable, especially with how well designed those trains are, and you definitely can't sleep on the ride. Before we get into my ratings on this coaster, I will mention that between my best rides and not so best rides, there is quite a gap, so trying to get exact ratings on this ride was and will be quite hard to nail down perfectly. With that said though, if you haven't seen one of my full in-depth reviews before, I have an unorthodox rating system. First, I'll start out with a ski slope rating, pretty much recommending how experienced of a coaster rider you should be before taking on a ride like this. I'll also have a 5-star rating for intensity and fun, and of course my personal rating out of 10. So without further ado, I'm gonna have to give this ride a black diamond. This is definitely for experienced riders, so I would push for you guys to ride rides like Thunderation at Silver Dollar City before checking this out, and probably Wildfire and Powder Keg as well, although they're kind of in the same intensity level, at least in my mind, but for completely different reasons. For my intensity rating, I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5 stars. It is quite intense, not necessarily in the layout itself, but just because there's that spinning factor, as well as just those elements that you go through can be quite intense depending on what row you're in. But honestly, I might even change that to a 3-star rating, especially if you're in a row like row 3 or 4. Moving on to fun though, I think this is also a 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's very fun. It's just there's a couple moments where it really kind of lulls out quite a bit. But as we move into my personal rating out of 10, this is an easy 9 for me. I think it's a fantastic fantastic roller coaster. I kind of hope that extreme spinning coasters are going to be put everywhere. I would absolutely adore to see one in Southern California soon. And I will say this, after riding Time Traveler as many times as I did, all I can hope is to ride every single one of these in the world, because I know they're just going to get better and better. With all that said though, I'm curious, what do you think of Time Traveler? Do you agree with me? Why or why not? Let me know down in the comments below. Of course, while you're down there though, check out the description for all of our links, including our link tree, which includes rankings for every single park that we're putting out, and it would really be helpful if you participate in those polls to help us rank every single ride at given parks or every coaster in California. And if you're curious, Silver Dollar City is currently one of those polls. With all that said though, I want to say thank you so much for watching. It really does mean the world, and I hope you're inclined to subscribe, as we're going to have more Silver Dollar City reviews coming, as well as plenty of other videos in the near future you're not going to want to miss out on. But with all that said, I want to say thank you again so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you on the next ride.